It's the top of the ninth inning. 2 outs, the count, of course, 3-2. You're the pitcher. With the 5-4 lead, you can end this right now. The man at bat readies in his stance. You focus hard at the glove of the catcher who knows you more than most people do. Out of the silence of focus, you hear a sound. It takes you a moment to realize that it's an alarm in the back of your head. Sounds like your continuous glucose monitor, alerting you of a low blood sugar. You know it can't be real. You just checked your blood sugar before the inning. It was resting at 120. Perfect for the amount of time you're pitching. Can your glucose really drop that quickly? You think back to the breakfast you had at 6 a.m. to help prepare you for your 11 a.m. start. Every game day, you have the same routine. This alarm is in your head, not real. You take a deep breath, trust yourself and your routines, and you refocus again. After a couple nods, you position yourself, and finally, throw the pitch. My name is Joseph Anthony Marcello. I am one of roughly 1.3 million people in the US and 8.4 million worldwide diagnosed with the autoimmune disease Type-1 diabetes. I am proud to call myself a weightlifter, a runner, a mountaineer, an athlete. As a T1D, I know I'm not the only one. We will discuss with others what it takes to be a T1D athlete and what it means to be tough. This is T1 Determined. Today, on the T1 Determined podcast, I sit down with Ben Wessel. Ben played baseball as a pitcher at the University of Rhode Island. Turning 30, he has had type 1 diabetes for 23 years, since he was 7 years old. Growing up playing sports year-round and earning scholarships to play baseball at the collegiate level, he has learned a lot about how to maximize performance while controlling blood glucose. Please enjoy our conversation. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that I am not a medical doctor. The topics I discuss, as well as others, are recommendations that best suit us specifically and are not prescriptions. Please use the information from this podcast in a way that best suits you. Please consult your medical professionals before making any alterations to your daily routines and therapies. Thank you, Ben, for being here.
Absolutely appreciate it.
On the T1 Determined podcast. It's season 1. Really appreciate it. If you just want to give a quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah, so again, my name is Ben Wessel. I'm just turned 30, so I'm 30 years old. I work for UPS as a business development consultant. A little bit of sales, a little bit of consultative approach with inventory management systems, warehouse development, overall efficiency with package flow. So I cover that now from Boston to Providence and now a little bit of Worcester. So I have a large territory there. But prior to that, I played baseball, basketball, and football growing up and was lucky enough to earn a scholarship to play baseball at University of Rhode Island. So I graduated there in 2017 and had diabetes since I was 7, so it's about 23 years now coming up.
Yeah. So let's dive in right away to when you got diagnosed with diabetes. Yeah. Was it something that was passed down to you through your family, or have you?
Yeah, so the way I was explained it, I was the first in my family to be a diabetic.
Okay.
So the way I was explained was diabetes is an autoimmune and white blood cell disease.
Yeah.
So again, nobody in my family had it prior to me. And my mom, actually, when she was in high school, she had something called Guillain-Barré. So it's an autoimmune white blood cell disease that ended up attacking her nervous system and making her partially paralyzed for about 90 days.
Wow. Just solely for 90 days.
Most people, about 75% of people, are paralyzed for the rest of her life. She was lucky as one of the 25% that got full functionality back.
That is fascinating.
Healthy and awesome, right? But when I first got diagnosed, that was part of the conversation. Like, look, you have an autoimmune white blood cell disease that runs through your family. It probably got passed down to you, and for you, as in me, the autoimmune disease just attacked my pancreatic cells. So that's how I first was explained it. I still believe that to this day. But with me, I was 7 years old, and all of us, I was like a healthy kid, about 80 pounds, whatever it was, in second grade. And all I remember is like I lost like 40 pounds, 45 pounds in about 2 months.
Wow. I mean, being
And
7 years old, did you
yeah,
have 40 pounds to lose?
no, I didn't. And it was like, it came to a point where there are pictures when I was a kid that my family still has, like during that time period. It's actually going to be 23 years this Saturday, April 6th.
Wow.
So April 6th, 2001 is when I got diagnosed. Well, like this time period when I was 7, I was like going to the doctor. I lived in a small town in Vermont, so we would kind of go to the local clinic, and they thought it was a couple different things between like the flu, pneumonia, whatever it was. Ended up being home one day, sick from school, and my mom asking me to come into the kitchen to have some lunch. And the next thing I know is like I'm seeing 2 different doorways, vision's all blurry, like feel really sick.
So you were, I can imagine, deep into DKA at that point.
DKA. And honestly, my memory kind of wipes after that. And the next thing I know, I was at Dartmouth Hitchcock in, I think it's Manchester, New Hampshire. But I woke up in a hospital there, and they said I was in DKA. And
which is diabetic ketoacidosis to reinforce.
And woke up and ended up kind of being diagnosed from there and just haven't looked back. So it was a pretty surprising diagnosis. Nobody in my family had it, but
Now, when you said you got diagnosed at 7 and earlier, you're saying how it was explained to you. Being 7 years old, not really knowing much at the time, how did that, just the terminology at first and kind of like the way it was explained to you, how did that impact you with a 7-year-old viewpoint of the world?
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough my mom has a nursing background, so she was somewhat knowledgeable with diabetes, just with handling some of her patients. But for me, I was lucky enough to have my mom there and my dad to be able to support me there. All I was explained was like, hey, look, you're gonna have to start taking needles now. Let's practice on these teddy bears, on these oranges. Like, you're gonna have to do this after you eat. Anytime you're feeling sick, you gotta prick your finger and test your blood sugar. All they would tell me at the time, from what I can remember, is be between 80 and 120. Like, when you test your blood, you want to be between 80 and 120.
Which is wild, because that's pretty strict.
It is. And it's like, that was something, just me growing up, I've always been, even at that age, I was extremely competitive for my age. So I took it as a challenge to be like, how strict do I have to be? How diligent do I have to be to try to be between these numbers? Because you're testing 8 to 12 times a day, and anytime it was like, if I went 12 for 12 in a day, it was a good day. If it was 10 for 12, all right, there are areas to improve. So that's how I evaluate it, even at that age.
That's a pretty good mindset to carry with you from 7 years old to now.
Yeah, it's always, like I said, very competitive. And, my parents have always been like, there's always worse things in the world, right? So trying to have a positive outlook on every situation and trying to conquer any sort of challenge that is presented my way. And that's kind of been engraved in me ever since I could walk, really.
I totally agree with that. I see this, as horrible as it is sometimes, we are given a unique opportunity to be healthy, to be healthier, to kind of know our body in a different sense.
Absolutely.
I personally eat a strict diet. You don't have to eat a strict diet, but having this has allowed me to be healthier in other ways of my life, like eating food. I just destroyed a steak before we talked. So,
Gotcha.
But at the same time, carb counting, you just have a different sense of what you're putting into your body.
100%. And it's something that I think for us, the way, again, I try to be as positive as I can. It benefited me at a younger age, being able to understand, like, this is how my body feels better when I'm eating these certain types of food versus when it's not. And that's carried on in my later life, because it's the same way now. It's like, hey, when I'm having these healthy carbs versus these sugars and heavy carbs, I don't feel as dragged down. I don't feel as foggy. Like, having that lesson at an early age has helped prepare me for later stages in life.
I like that. And you talk about the whole mind and how you feel with you when you eat certain foods.
Hmm.
And I mean that we can dive into it in a bit, but that goes right into performance. And
100%.
with every kind of sport, it depends what you eat right before it, what you eat after,
Yep.
to keep you controlled for the next game and for the game that you're in. So now you said you were the first one in your family. Have you had siblings diagnosed as
Yeah,
well?
so I have two younger brothers. I just turned 30. Sam's 29 and Nate's 27, turning 28. So we're all really close.
Yeah.
It skipped Sam, and I will never forget this. I had diabetes for about 7 or 8 years, and our family just moved from Vermont to Maine. And Nate was still in elementary school. It was about the same age that I got diagnosed. And we were at an IHOP, and my mom was noticing his symptoms. Like with me, I was going to the bathroom like every 30 seconds. It was
Yeah.
like a puppy, right?
Yeah.
Like every 30 seconds I had to go. Like I was drinking so many different fluids, eyes were a little dilated, pale face. And we were out as a family breakfast one day at IHOP, and my mom kind of noticed Nate like just not eating, drinking a ton of water, drinking a lot of different things. So she ended up testing his blood sugar while we were out to breakfast with my test kit, and he came back and he had a 340 blood sugar.
Wow.
So she just knew, again, with her nursing background, but through the experience that I went through, recognizing the symptoms and then identifying Nate, we were lucky enough to get to Nate before he went into DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. But again, Nate has diabetes. He's had it since he was actually 9. So he's had it for about 18 years now.
Wow. So at that point, I mean, in a way, it's kind of, at that moment that it's in the genes, it's genetics from that
Yeah.
point, but it's also good that you got it before so she could see those
Right,
symptoms.
right.
I mean, if it's scary how many people go through these symptoms when family members don't know what to look for. Most
Yeah.
of the time when people are diagnosed, they're weeks away from something tragic happening.
100%. And that's, it is honestly a blessing in disguise there, where yes, he has it. He does great with it. He's actually a UPS driver. So you have to get certain licensing and be able to
Nice.
drive those trucks with diabetes. So
Yeah.
he has that. He takes great care of it, and be able to recognize that at an early age and just having my experience be something that she could use to identify his definitely helped.
That's wonderful. And I can imagine that it's brought your family really close.
Yeah, it has. It's again, we're very competitive. So, sometimes when I see, Nate's got a great handle of it now. For him, it was a little bit more challenging in high school, just because he was more of a 2-sport guy. I was a 3-sport guy, but there
Yeah.
was, he had a harder time at moments kind of controlling it. And he's gotten the most up-to-date technology and has had that for a while, where he now understands like, okay, this is my routine. This is what I need to do. So he's definitely doing very good with it right now.
That's great. And so, speaking of technology, what is your current therapy method and what technologies do you use?
Yeah, so I'm on the Dexcom right now.
Okay, me
So I
too.
have the Dexcom G6,
Yeah.
and it's I change is a good thing. When I have been so used to a certain way your whole life, sometimes change can be frustrating and a little intimidating to kind
Yeah.
of get your head around. It took me a little while to get on the Dexcom, but ever since I, started it's helped my life tremendously. I can just go about my day to day without having to like worry about other areas of like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom to test my sugar or give insulin, stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we can talk about the ups and downs that come with in a world where continuous glucose monitors are still new. They're still
Yeah,
trying to figure out softwares and bugs. But I mean, overall, I believe it has transformed the game of controlling
it's.
glucose.
I wish I had it earlier, especially when I was, playing sports in college. But again, right now, that's what I'm using, and it's been a game changer for me. They got a new actually upgrade for it, the G7, where you
Yeah.
can actually give insulin through your phone. I don't have
That's
that
really
yet.
cool. Yeah. So you're on a pump.
I'm on the pump still.
Yeah.
Yep. And the cool thing about it is like I'm very active still. I like to work out and do different things throughout every day of the week. You got different things like exercise mode, sleep mode. You can kind of customize your pump and the insulin flowing through you based on what your daily routine is, which
Yeah.
is something you never had in the past.
Yeah.
So I'll give Dexcom a shout out there. Like it's awesome that we're able to kind of be as normal, if you will, as possible. Like even with having, diabetes in the background and being able to live your life the way you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I think the customization aspect is key because, as you probably know, with your brother and just other people that you know, it just type 1 diabetes is so individualized.
Mm.
It's like you eat a banana. If I eat a banana, you eat a banana, our blood sugar levels are going to do two totally different
And it's
things.
crazy that, in my opinion, I don't feel like that's recognized enough. I've and every doctor's different, but you go to different places, and especially for me, I've gone to get different consultations, get evaluated by different people, and it's like, oh, you're an athlete, you're this, you're that, this is your daily job. Like the standard person that's the same size as you, that has the same sort of interests and hobbies and activities that you do. It's there's been times where I'm like, they need to be more individualized because it's different for every single person.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
feel like that gets recognized enough, at least on the back end when it comes to like consulting people one on one on how to manage their diabetes to the fullest potential.
Yeah, I mean, even if you just look at it statistically, I was reading something that said you could have a great A1C. Your A1C could be
Yeah.
below 6 in theory, but that's not good if you're going up and down, up and down. I mean, the
Right.
A1C is the median. So what happens if you're at 60, then you're at like 250, and then you're back down to 50, and your A1C in theory is really good, but
Right.
those blood sugars aren't stable. That's not, they measure that by your health, but
I
that
would like to see the stats on, okay, how does your A1C when it's like you said, if it's a 6.6 and you're spiking and dropping. All right, let's take a blood test on your kidneys and your liver to see
Yeah,
how that's impacting there,
exactly.
right? Like
Yeah,
what are the levels there that are normal? So there's a whole lot we can go down there, but I do agree with you. It's individualized per person that, there's a lot to it that I feel like they just need to focus on the individual and their everyday habits
mhm,
versus like a group at a certain age group. You know what I mean?
totally agreed. Now, so you got diagnosed at 7. Your
Hmm.
brother got diagnosed at 9 years old.
Yep.
You said you grew up in a competitive family mindset, friendly
Yep.
competition, which helped you guys drive each other. Now, at what point was it right away at 7 years old, or did it take a couple years? At what point did you want to consider to bring sports into your life?
Yeah. So I was. There's a picture of me when I was born. My dad played professional baseball,
Yeah.
so he played for the Montreal Expos and now the Cleveland Guardians. But there's a picture of me when I was born, and I'm sitting in his baseball gloves. So like
Yeah.
it's kind of been in the blood though ever since I was born.
He must have a huge hand.
Yeah, so his glove's a little, I think it was like 12 inches long, but I was just sitting in the pocket of it. But you know, growing up playing sports, played football, basketball, baseball. I actually did a little bit of wrestling at one point, and I think my family and my dad was very, and even my grandfather on my mom's side, like he played as well. They were very impactful and like, look, if you want to play, you can play. Don't let this hold you back. And at an early age, I think from my competitive mindset and like drive that I had, I've always set my goal on like I want to get as far as I can with like a sport, not
Yeah.
just whether it's baseball, basketball, or football. As I got older and bigger and stronger, baseball definitely was my best sport compared to the other two. And it was really like eighth grade, I think was I got a scholarship to play in eighth grade. So that was unexpected, but that was the real like eye opener. Like, okay, like this is actually something that could happen.
Yeah.
And going from there, it was like, how do I get physically prepared and mentally prepared to handle possibly being away from home and managing my diabetes without having my mom and dad there to help me
Yeah.
with certain things and wrap my head around what works for my body diabetically and
Yeah.
what doesn't work for my
While
body.
having these aspirations for
Right.
sports, you don't
Exactly.
only have to focus on the diabetes, you have to focus on your performance at the same time,
Exactly.
especially with that added level of pressure with the scholarships that come.
Yeah. So, that's part of it. And then kind of being at, if I would have liked to stay in Maine, my best opportunities were outside of Maine. So it was really
Yeah.
the first time being on my own without someone by my side to kind of help guide me through things.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of like, okay, my junior and senior year of high school, once I had an understanding of, I was committed to URI. All right, how do I understand my body and my diabetes and where do my levels go in certain situations? Like I would be playing a game, and at the same time, I'm taking notes as to say, like, okay, this is what happened in this situation. This is what happened in this situation.
Notes
So
are huge. I mean,
exactly.
I can't stress that enough to everybody listening. Take notes.
Yeah.
Whether it's on your phone. I personally write notes handwritten. I'm old school. I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but I tend
I
to.
had a journal that I'd carry around in my backpack for all the sports, and it was just like if I felt low, it's like all right, I felt low at this moment in the game, and then it's kind of like reflecting on what happened in the game. Is it
Yeah.
adrenaline based? Is it going from an adrenaline base to dropping off because we have a lead? Like just little things like that that I recognize says, okay, if this happens again, this is how I'm going to adjust to it, so I stay more plateaued rather than the spike in the fall.
Yeah, and notes. I mean, just that what you just said. Also, it tells you how you feel during these sort of situations. I mean, we have the technology now to look at our blood sugars at what point during the game.
Right.
I think the CGMs are great with that.
Yep.
I mean, even if you're doing a run, you can track your run with like a
Yeah.
Garmin, for example. Not sponsored by Garmin, but just using it as an example,
Right.
and then correlate that with the track from your CGM. But still, handwritten notes tell you how you feel.
Exactly.
You can't say at 5 miles in on a run, for example, exactly how you feel unless you write that thought down directly
Exactly.
after the run.
Exactly.
I always do trip reports.
Okay.
Whenever I do anything, I get
Right.
back and I just write if I was afraid, what my blood sugar was at when I was
Yeah.
afraid, and you correlate that with an adrenaline. A lot of times you can see at the beginning of a climb, not only sugar, because I try to intake a lot of sugar before exerting myself, but the adrenaline just
Right.
boosts that.
And
the
it's even
glucose
more
right
so
up.
like with the like I know with you as well, especially for what you do for some of your activities and hobbies. It's like you have to plan ahead to a T,
Yeah.
right? So it's like those times in late high school, early college where I would have a certain pregame routine that I would do with
Yep.
food and different things I would eat and drink. Part of that journaling was like, okay, in this inning or in this quarter, this is where I went from being 160, 180 and crashed down to 65, 70.
Yeah.
So I would have an understanding of, okay, if that happened in the fifth inning, how about, in the third inning when I come into the dugout, like I have a quick Nature Valley bar or something like that just to sustain.
Did it tend to be similar throughout most games, or did it differ obviously based off the?
Once I got like the individual routine of specific foods that worked for me, specific drinks that worked for me, it was consistent every single time of when that drop off would be, and it would always be in the fourth inning. The
Yeah.
fourth inning was like, baseball's it's quicker now, but it was a long sport. So there's, you're out there pitching, and then you're sitting on the bench, and then by the fourth inning, you're about 45 minutes to an hour into it, exerting energy, and then that's where I would see the drop off happen, where I was like, okay, need a little 15, 20 grams in my
Yeah.
system here, so I don't go below 100. I want to be between 120 to 160 while I'm active,
Yeah.
just to sustain that peak level.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think it's amazing that it seems
Right.
to be consistent. I mean, I find the same thing with
Yep.
running. I'm set to go. Like, I don't need a lot more sugar if I'm just running a mile or two. It tends to be right at the 2 mile mark is where I notice the dip in
Right.
blood sugar. Even if I have fruit before,
Yeah.
it will peak about a mile and a half, and right at the 2 mile mark every single time just goes right
It's
back
crazy.
down.
It's crazy how the body works and how regimented it can be on like, okay, I've used
Yep.
it all up. Give me some more.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, which is good because I mean the consistency helps you
Yeah.
plan.
100%.
It
100%.
helps you prepare. So you said that you did baseball, football as well, basketball. You
Yep.
even tried wrestling, and you learned quickly. I mean, when you were a young kid and you were starting off with these sports, were you well prepared, knowing that your type 1 diabetes would be affected by sports, or did you kind of start to learn by trial and error, and as the years went on?
100% trial and error. I
Yeah.
think that as a diabetic that's playing sports, whether newly diagnosed or if you're a younger kid and working out, the goods and the bads with it is a lot of trial and error on your own.
Yeah.
And by that, it's like I ended up going to a diabetic nutritionist when I was in college, but that two parts of that were I was like I had a hard time handling my diabetes on my own my freshman year of college.
Yeah.
So my weight would fluctuate, and then with the sport that I was playing, like I needed to sustain a weight. I would go from 190 pounds down to 170 within like a 2-month period, and
Yeah.
that was just the demand in travel, the demand in change of routine. Like I'm taking classes and then having to do 2-a-day workouts, waking up at 4:30 in the morning, going to classes, going to
So
practice,
you don't
going to
have time
weight
for
lift.
anything else.
So
I
then
mean,
it's like, I would eat breakfast, eat lunch, eat dinner. What I ended up going to speak with this professional on, this diabetic nutritionist, was like, there are 2 things you need to do to sustain weight. 1, continue to test your blood sugar 8 times a day, minimum. Second part was I had a gallon jug of water that I would, for every 15 minutes out of the day, depending on how long my day was,
Yeah.
I would mark off with a Sharpie marker where I needed to drink in order to drink the full gallon of water by the end of the day.
yeah.
And that was every single day I did that. And then on top of it, when I was needing to put weight back on, I saw this nutritionist and she was like, look, what are some foods you like, you don't like? How can we substitute that? At the end of the day, it was, all right, you have breakfast at 5 a.m. Have your bagel with egg whites and fruit on the side. And then I would go and work out in the morning at 5:30 lift. I'd get done at 7 or 8. Okay, go ahead and have an omelet at the cafeteria,
Yeah.
have this, have that. She would emphasize the time between the 7 a.m. breakfast and the noon lunch, that 9:30, 10 o'clock slot. You need to have this much water drank, and you need to have a chocolate milk with a Nature Valley granola bar, and every bite you have to have a jar of peanut butter with you.
Yep.
Take the peanut butter, scoop it on there. And it was like you have to do that between 9:30 and 10. You have your lunch, whatever you want. At 2:30, you need to do that same thing, chocolate milk and Nature Valley and peanut butter. Then you have your dinner, and then it was the same thing. So I was on this regimented routine really since.
I mean, there's multiple things that can speak to that.
Yeah.
Routine and consistency. Living with type 1 diabetes, but when you're trying to be an athlete in
Right.
whatever sport you have, I think it's key. I think that's what separates the glucose control and to maximize your performance.
100%.
Just you got to be strict on yourself, and I can imagine that's not easy. Speaking for myself, and you probably
Yeah.
feel the same way. There's some days where you are full and you don't want to eat, and your blood sugar's going down, and you have to eat. I wake up every morning. I have the same breakfast. I have the same lunch. I have relatively the
Right.
same dinner. And the other point I want to bring up is it's not just about eating glucose to maintain glucose. It's about the fats. It's about the
Yeah.
proteins.
Yep.
You're having the chocolate shake with
Yeah, the
with
chocolate
peanut
milk. It was a
butter.
little Oakhurst bottle, chocolate milk, but nice 12 ounce there. But and to your point there, I think that the routine of it all. My biggest thing was like going through that. I wasn't used to that schedule, so what I
Mhm.
ended up doing was setting alarms on my phone.
Yeah.
And growing up, I never wanted people to know I had diabetes.
Yeah.
Like I didn't want people to think, and not that people do, but I just didn't want people to think differently of me, especially like coaches and different things like that. Where like, oh,
Especially, I think you grew up in a time period where it wasn't as well known as it is today.
right, exactly. And for me, it was I didn't like my alarm would go off to eat and check my sugar in the middle of a class, right? And everybody would turn and look at me, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I got to do this, right?
Yeah.
And then it got so consistent with it, it was like an internal clock on me. It would be like, all right, it's 9:27. I wouldn't even need to look at my phone. I would just check it real quick, and it'd be 3 minutes before the alarm went off. And it's
Mhm.
like your body just becomes it's a creature of habit. It just becomes accustomed to what
Yeah.
you do every single day. So, to that point, it was just like it became a habit, routine, and something I still do to this day. But especially during that time period, I needed to do it to be successful.
Now, was there a point that you hit in your routine that you felt more comfortable with saying to others around you that you were doing this to better your performance, essentially?
So that didn't come to me until later in life, honestly,
Okay.
about like 10 years ago, maybe like 5 or 8. But again, a lot of my teammates, honestly, in college, some of the new kids, the new freshman class and stuff like that, they didn't even know I had diabetes. One, because I took pride in like taking care of myself and being so good with it. But then
Yeah.
the other aspect of it was like I kind of didn't want to like tell people or let them know because it's a personal challenge to me to be the best that I could at it.
Yeah.
Now I had a teammate in college that was also a diabetic, so I was able to like have some camaraderie with him and like
Yeah.
be able to, relate to somebody in that way.
Now, how was he open about it at first? How did you
He
both discover that you had
He
type
was
1?
extremely open about it. His name's Derek. He's a great guy. We were like the only, I think there was something that came out. We were like the only pitcher catcher combination in Division I baseball to both be diabetics.
That's pretty unique.
Isn't that cool?
I mean, you hear about the firsts of everything, especially the first diabetics to do accomplishments.
Right. So it was, you don't realize it at the time because Derek's a great guy, full of energy, like, and for him and he would call me his diabetes brother. So like, he had a mini med pump, and I'm not the biggest fan of the glucose tablets.
Yeah.
He would eat them like they were like Smarties at Halloween, like. And
they're just giant Smarties. That's all.
Well,
the
whole team would be like, "Ben, does Derek really need to take those?" And I'm like, Derek likes those. I like these small little Gatorade bottles. They do the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And the team, I mean, guys on the team would be like, let me get a fix. So like we would go around and like just drop like tablets in people's hands and they would just chew them like candy at times. But like they had to, do something well in the game in order to earn that.
So before I knew that Gatorade did the same thing as the glucose tablets, I now use the energy gels.
Oh,
the little cubes. I love them. They have caffeine in them. Even gets more of my caffeine fix, which is amazing. There was a time I was hiking and I was by myself and I was up in New Hampshire and I was hiking probably up 4,000, 5,000 feet of elevation gain, middle of the summer, really hot.
Yeah.
I was sweating, heart pumping.
Yep.
I had no idea that there were other things out there that could boost my blood sugar while hiking.
Right.
And I just had a giant pack of glucose tablets that I bought from CVS, the jumbo pack. I went through the entire thing that day. And I was 2 miles away from the trailhead. I ate my last glucose tablet, and my mouth was so chalky. And I was about to throw up from the amount of sugar that I ate.
I know, yeah. It's like, because, they recommend like 3 to 5 at a time, but then you're kind of just like, well, these taste like candy, so I'm going to have maybe another one and just correct with it. And the chalkiness after is what, I had so many of them.
It did me in. Right away I researched I got home that night and I was like, what else can I have?
Right.
I can't.
Yeah.
And they're good. And it's been a while since I had them and I used to love them. But when I had so much in a single day.
It's like, you can only have a certain amount and then you get the taste just kind of sits in your mouth there no matter how many times you brush or wash your mouth out and you're like, I don't know if I can chew these ever again.
Well, they did the job. They kept me here.
Kept us going.
Yep. So baseball is your favorite sport.
Yep.
You're a Guardians fan because of your dad?
Yeah.
A Sox fan?
I'm a Sox fan.
Okay. All right, great.
So, we're all Sox fans. If there are two teams that I root for outside of the Red Sox, it is they're now the Washington Nationals. And my wife actually is from the D.C. area, so we get to go down there a decent amount. So I like going to see them, and then I'll probably root for the Guardians third with a couple other mix of teams.
Okay. Cool. I can still talk to you.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing is if you're from Boston or live in the area or even in New England and you're not a Red Sox fan, I kind of have a immediate judgment, but that's okay.
I went to school in Connecticut and the area of Connecticut was like a blend of, it was half Sox, half Yankees.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get.
Where'd you go to school again?
I went to Quinnipiac.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. So that's like almost kind of Western Connecticut area where it
was New York culture.
Yeah. 100%.
With the blend of people from Boston.
Yeah, exactly.
But having your diabetes brother playing, did you two, similar to your family, did you two ever have a friendly competition in glucose control?
Yeah, he was, for me, when I was in game days, it's like tunnel vision, focus on what I need to do. Like, obviously, I'm being a good teammate to everybody else, but I'm just like, I need to focus on what I need to do to be at my best. He would always come up to me, like, as I walk off the field to go in the dugout, like, Ben, what's your sugar? What's your sugar? I'm at 136 right now. What's your sugar? And I'll be like, Derek, like, I'm 158, but it's because I'm pitching. I want to be here. Like, let's have an understanding here. But no, he definitely helped.
I think that's great that he approached you with his He's
Yeah.
asking you what yours is, but he's saying, "Here's mine.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not asking you to pest you. I'm kind of asking you to help you."
Right. And then there was one time where I just had a bad outing, and I think that he came up and he's like, "Is your sugar low?" And it's like, "No, it's not. I'm just sucking today."
Yeah.
Like,
I'm just mad because I'm not playing well.
Don't blame it on the diabetes. Like, it's
Yep.
just me. But no, him and I would go back and forth a lot during that, and it kind of became like a team thing. It's like, all right, Ben, all right, Derek, like, guess your sugar, right? Like,
Yep.
based on how you're feeling, guess your blood sugar. And then it was like whoever won, like a whole team would cheer and clap for and stuff like that.
I
So
mean, that's
it
pretty
was,
cool. I mean,
yeah,
the fact that it's in good nature, it's
100%.
all.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think other type 1 diabetics could benefit from having a sort of relationship like that? Just kind of that supportive group of other type 1 diabetics.
I think that being able to discuss with somebody else that has the same like diabetes, for example, right? So like somebody that understands maybe your symptoms, the way you're feeling, things that work for you, things that don't. A lot of times with me, with Derek, was like, hey, what are you doing before these workout lifts? Because I was so focused on like, all right, how's my performance at the end of the day on the field?
Yeah.
But like there's so much more that goes into it. I would pitch one time a week, right? So then it's like the other 6 days of the week, I'm working out a lot. I'm doing different things to get my body ready for the next appearance. He was a catcher, so he was playing almost every day, but like we would still do a lot of crossover with like prepping ourselves for the next outing.
Yeah.
So I would always try to go to him and ask like, hey, what are you doing before you go into a workout lift or a post game lift? We just kind of do some like body work stuff. And I would always kind of go low during that. So I would kind of pick his brain on different things. But to have someone that you can relate to and kind of say, hey, this is what worked for me, or vice versa, they can say, this is what worked for me. You can try different things that
And
may
then
not be
tailor
well
it
known and
towards-
tailor it to
yeah.
what is going to be best for you.
Yeah. Because I mean, as different as it is in the individual, type 1 diabetes is a science.
100%.
And
Yeah.
it tends to work in a certain way and then be adjusted to the individual.
Right.
It's like you eat glucose, your blood sugar is going to rise. That will happen in everybody, but it's different how it rises.
It's even crazier too, because I'm like at the time, and I still am, I was a taller, skinnier kid. I'm 6'2" and whatever weight now, but like in college, I was 6'2", 190, 195. Derek was on the roster. It says 5'11". He was more like 5'9", but he's 5'9", and he was like 245 pounds. But he was
Derek, I feel your pain.
but no, he was all muscle. You know what I mean? So it's like you have two different body types there. That it's like, to speak on diabetes is individual and individualized, but be able to like, okay, if this works for him, maybe I tweak this a little bit less because he's a little bit of a stronger guy than I am. It may break down a little bit faster to me.
And he has that different muscle mass, body mass than you, just in height. I mean, so I'm 5'10" and 3/4. The doctors won't give me the extra 1/4
Whatever
to
it
say
says on the
5'11".
license.
It's 5'11" everywhere. I'm 5'11". Just
there you go.
Pretend you didn't hear that. So another great thing that I think you mentioned was when you were playing and you were mentioning that your blood sugar was at 158 and you told Derek that you want your blood sugar there.
Yep.
I am very much similar the same way. When I am doing an activity, I would, of course, rather have my blood sugar higher than lower. Would not want to go low for many reasons. I mean, mountaineering specifically, you're out in the middle of nowhere. You don't want to pass out, God forbid. But I feel more comfortable when I'm above 100. So 100 tends to be the threshold. I don't know what yours is specifically.
Yeah, mine's 80. But to your point, exercising, like I play pickup basketball Tuesday nights, and it's like when I go into that, if I'm below really 150, then it's like, okay, I need like half a Gatorade or a little bit of fruit or something like that to get me to it bumps me up to like 160, 180.
Yeah.
But knowing, I think it's just a peace of mind kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, I'm fine with just sitting in society, sitting at my desk and being at 75, 80, 90, and I don't have to check. I don't have to worry about my blood sugar. But if I'm out and I know I'm going to have to do another mile of hiking and I'm at 75, 80, 90, that's a different story.
Right.
I would rather be up because if I'm at 150 and I have a mile left of my incline, I'm good for a mile. I don't have to check my blood sugar for a mile. Mile later, I'll check my blood sugar, I'll check my CGM. But it gives you that peace of mind to enjoy the sport, but also be focused into the sport.
100%. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that anytime when I was playing and I was around the 100 to 120 range, it was almost like a back of my head trigger, like at some point this is going to come down.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like you're not able to focus, like you said, on the task at hand and like enjoying the moment. You're more concerned of like, how do I prevent this low from happening later on in the process? Right.
Yeah. And we touched on it a lot already, but you had pre-game routines, during the game routines, and post-game routines.
I'll try to keep this short and sweet.
I can imagine it's a lot.
So we discussed a little bit of my day-to-day, when it came to game day, right? In college, we didn't have lights in our field, so our games were at 3 p.m. on Friday, 1 p.m. on Saturday, 11 a.m. on Sunday. And depending on most of the time I was a Sunday starter, but if I had to throw on Friday or if I had to throw on Saturday, just adjust my routine a little bit by a couple hours. But I was down to the minute on my start days where I was like, all right, if I'm pitching at 11 a.m., I'm waking up at 6:13 in the morning. I'm having breakfast, getting done by 6:49, getting into the locker room for 8 a.m. is when you do the batting practice and stuff.
Yeah,
But
wow.
like,
So you were down to a T,
to the minute,
exact minute.
and it translated with my pregame routine before I'd pitch, right? Like the performance aspect, not the diabetes. Like I had a handheld like notebook that by the minute it was all written down for me. There's a diabetes one, and then there was a pitching one. And the pitching one was, all right, go and start jogging an hour and 6 minutes before the game starts. Get done your stretching and I had this whole running and stretching routine. Then it was like, get done with stretching with 47 minutes before the game. Go through throw these amount of balls and warm up, like all this stuff. And it would go, I had to do that to be at my best mentally. And then it translated to how my diabetes reacted to my body when I was going through all that. So there was a lot of to the detail by the minute of like what made me be successful, and it did pay off in the end.
I think the correlation is fascinating. I mean,
Right.
your routine is, you separate it from your diabetes and sports, but it's also, like you just said, everything has to be in line for your mind to be there completely.
And it's crazy right now because at the professional level, there are two that I can think of off the top, or really three or four, but currently playing. There's a pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. His name's Jordan Hicks. He's a Type-1 diabetic, and I've followed his story a little bit. He got diagnosed later in his life while he was playing professional baseball, and he's come out and said a lot of like what his routine is, and it's like, this is where I've had to do a lot of trial and error. This is where I find myself.
I can imagine if he just recently got diagnosed, he's
Right.
still learning.
I think it's within like 4 or 5 years, and I mean they have like a lot of resources and different things like that they can fall on like at the professional level. But like Mark Andrews plays in the NFL for the Baltimore Ravens, and he's a Type-1 diabetic. Like you see a lot of stories on his preparation throughout the week.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different, especially with sports, right? You're starting to see more and more people come out and try to kind of do what we're doing here and highlight diabetes and how to be the best that you can be without having it impact your profession. And really, it's their job, right? It's their job to perform.
Yeah.
So I would definitely
encourage. So they have to take that into consideration.
100%.
I mean, each sport is different. You look at football, short sprints. Short sprints every couple minutes. I mean, that's essentially what it is.
Right.
You're just dashing. I mean, you're hitting people. So those impacts make a big difference. That's very much different than weightlifting in the gym.
100.
Very much different than running a marathon.
And I would encourage, younger kids that are listening, or kids in high school that are playing sports, like go on Google and just type in Jordan Hicks diabetes or Mark Andrews, because they talk about their routine, and it's like you have more resources than I feel like we had when we first got diagnosed to understand from an athletic standpoint, this is what they need to do, so you can kind of tailor your routine.
Exactly, and even if it doesn't work for you, use it as a starting point,
right,
to build your own foundation.
Right.
So it's kind of like I'm a filmmaker. I learned from watching the best filmmakers, and then you use that and tailor it and create your own sort of style. Diabetes, I mean, kind of in a way want to look at it like art.
Right.
You're trying to do the best that you can personally, in your desired sport. And that means that you have to look at the people that came before you, the people that are currently in the game right now, and use that information, but alter it at the same time.
Being open-minded, like being open to change, being able to adapt to the environment you're in and the way
Yeah.
your body's reacting. That's the biggest thing that I feel like if you were to take any notes is learn from other people, read other stories, and try to tailor something and try new things that you won't know until you try if it works or not.
Yeah. Now, this is something that we have for the rest of our lives. And as we continue to live and time goes on, how important do you think continuously learning is? Like, continue you educating yourself on diabetes? Because I mean, your blood sugar probably acts differently now than it did when you were playing.
1000%. And it's now that I'm in the real world, unfortunately, we're both kind of in the real world.
It's
Being
rough.
30, yeah, it's not like it was when we were 16. But you know, the change, like my day to day schedule, I try to be as diligent and routine as I can on when I wake up, when I eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the snacks I have throughout the day. Like that's something that I've put a focus on in my body. Now that I've gotten older, it's starting to react differently. So how do I handle those reactions? How do I handle those spikes, those drops that I didn't have before? And that's just coming with age, right?
Yeah.
Age, I don't think that I get stressed that often, but I can tell when something's, whether it's work, whether it's personal life, when something's on my mind, I can tell by the way I feel. It's my blood sugar won't be above 200 or
Yeah.
220, but I get this. I still get the symptoms like I am
Yeah.
above 200,
I
220.
can totally agree to that. I was at 140 the other day.
Right.
And I was feeling the effects like it was in the 200s, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I was sleeping and my blood sugar was around 80.
Hmm.
So my body probably got used to it being between 80 and 90 for a while, and now
Right.
it's at 140.
Right.
For a type 1 diabetic, that's not a big difference because we're used to it. But in actuality, if you didn't have diabetes, a blood sugar between 80 and 140 is a massive difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like it's like to your point there, you're riding a certain level for a certain amount of time, and then if it either elevates or drops, right? Like your body's going to react, even if it's not significant.
Yeah.
But it's like I don't know how to put this. It's like the stress that I don't feel like I am, but like my body's recognizing it, and it's just like the sugars that I see there. It's almost treat. I'm not giving insulin that way, but like I'm kind of having to take a step back, understand like what's going on, and like really evaluate. Okay, how am I going to treat this moving forward
Yeah.
versus like just kind of letting it ride because the symptoms. I kind of feel like as we get older, and everybody's individualized, like we said, with their diabetes. For me, I kind of feel lucky, and I think it's a testament to how well I kept my sugars in range. But my symptoms hit harder now that I'm getting older, as
Yeah.
in like when they're rising, when they're dropping, I can feel them when it's like a 10 to 15 point drop, where in the past, that never was the case. Now, that's not everybody's reaction. I know
No.
people that as they've gotten older, they lose symptoms,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So just being aware, and again, it's writing down your symptoms, having an understanding what they are, and
And just knowing that it's not, you can figure out your control for a month at a time maybe,
yeah,
and know that it will change, it will be constantly changing.
constantly changing. And you never, you can always plan the best you can for your next day or the current moment that you're in, but you don't have control over a lot of things now,
Yeah.
especially with us in the real world. There's things that may be out of our control that it's like, all right, you go through those exposure, the experience of it, and then how do you learn from it for when it comes up again? It's just like taking those notes and understanding what happened in the past to prevent it again from the future.
Exactly. And I mean, this is with sports, but this is also outside of sports.
Right.
I like to think of it as a domino effect.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm working on a movie set late at night, I don't get home till after midnight, and then I get 5 hours of sleep. It's kind of like, not only am I stressed from constantly working the day before, I have the lack of sleep, and now I'm
Yeah.
up early again. It's just so many different aspects, and this doesn't even get into working out or training or
Right.
actually playing the sport. There's so many life um, I don't want to say obstacles, but there's so many aspects to life that can throw off different chemicals that then affect.
Definitely. And you more you get thrown into new situations, the more of those chemicals and different reactions that you have, right? And I think to your point there, it's like that's not happening. Would you confirm that that's happening every single day? You're only getting
No.
5 hours. Exactly.
Exactly. So
like,
you know when it's happening.
Right.
I think that's a very, very good point. It's not, if it's happening every day, you know that you're doing something wrong and you're going to adjust to it.
Definitely.
And then if it happens for like a week at a time, the notes again, you can pinpoint what is the root cause of it.
Exactly. Identifying trends versus situations, and trends, again, lasting more than a day or two versus a situation where it could just be a couple hours out of that day,
Yeah.
right? Like getting an understanding of what's a trend and what is just a current situation.
How important do you think patience with yourself is?
I need more of it.
I always emphasize that it's a must, but I totally agree with you.
Yeah, it's the patience aspect of it is, you think you have things figured out until they're not. And what I mean by that is you think you have a certain routine or a certain way of treating either a high or a low that works, and then the situation pops up where what you're trying is not working anymore. And I would get frustrated, especially growing up, where if I was giving myself insulin, making sure I'm drinking water, like doing everything that I thought I was supposed to be doing to be where I needed to be at. And for some reason, and it may not, I could have been getting sick and I didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
Or, there's something that it's not subconsciously on my mind, but it's in the back of my mind that I'm not actively thinking on, like that would throw different things out of loop. And I would lose patience pretty quick with myself and just get frustrated if I couldn't figure out how to get it into that 80 to 120 range.
Yeah. And I mean, that just comes, not only is that loss of patience probably associated with fluctuating blood sugars, but I mean, that just comes with the cost of having this added pressure to do well.
Yeah. And I always try to put pressure on myself, and in certain areas though, right? It's just try to be the best you can be every single day. It's kind of what's been instilled in me by my mom and dad and family members.
I think that's great.
I'm my hardest critic. I think everybody would say that, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you are too.
Yeah.
Where it's like if things are not working, whether it's diabetes related or not, it's like how do we fix this? It's like you try to be a problem
You
solver
work
the best
with yourself
you can.
as a team, though.
Exactly.
It's like you're the hardest on your. Like I'm very hard on myself.
Yeah.
But I have an immense amount of trust in myself, and I can imagine you.
So
have
that's the
same.
point. That's what I was going to bring up, is like the patience is something that I've learned over the years with handling my diabetes, where it's just like you just got to trust the outcome. If you're doing the right things,
Yeah.
and whether it's an immediate response or a long-term response, it's like it's all a process. You need to trust the outcome.
And the trends. This comes back to the
Yeah.
trends. I sometimes have an anxiety, for example, when I eat breakfast and I do MDIs, multiple daily injections. I have a little bit of oat milk with my cereal. So I take normally before a meal, I inject my insulin 15 minutes before a meal.
Right.
Because of the sugar content in the oat milk, I inject my insulin 20 minutes before my breakfast meal.
Wow,
Just that
okay.
extra 5 minutes allows a less of a spike
Yeah.
after the meal. Sometimes my blood sugar is lower in the morning, like I say, when I wake up, and I have this fear that that extra 5 minutes is going to drop me lower.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself almost every day that just like calm down, wait the 5 minutes, eat your breakfast, you're going to be fine. You're going to thank yourself in 30 minutes when it actually does, because you write down those trends and the trend actually follows, and
Right.
you know your routine. So just kind of reminding yourself of those situations.
Exactly. And documenting the successes is just as important as documenting the things that didn't work. Right.
Yeah.
So, taking that self-reflection to say, I did good with this today. Again, we're our own biggest critics, but take that same time to reflect and be your biggest advocate too.
Yeah.
And take that opportunity to document those successes. I think that goes a long way with it.
Yeah.
And helping the patients in that way.
I think that's great, and I think that's great to say for people listening, because a lot of
Yeah.
people don't know that, and a lot of people need that motivation.
Right. You know, there's so much negativity everywhere. If you're negative,
Yeah.
negative, negative all the time, it's like it's great to hear positivity and compliments from other people, but take the time to reflect on the positive outcomes of handling your diabetes and being able to see those trends, come to fruition.
So overall, continue be hard on yourself. It's okay to be hard on yourself, but be kind to yourself and be
Yep.
positive to
Exactly.
yourself. Now, a little bit of a transition here, and this is one of my final questions for you.
Okay.
From a technological standpoint, what future inventions would you like to see either be improved upon or just created and invented?
That's a great question. Obviously, a cure would be great.
Yeah.
But, from a technological standpoint, I think that just even trying to customize, like, it's been night and day for me with the Dexcom, how easily I'm able to go about my day and my lifestyle.
Yeah.
I think enhancing on something similar to that, a big thing for me growing up was I was so skinny, I would build scar tissue with sites.
Yeah.
So having multiple site locations, again, it's a small catheter on the sensor, but if we're able to find a way where it can be linked in with the IV insertion site to
Yeah.
your pump, so you're not having to just every time you switch your pump, maybe
You just have one site.
exactly.
That'd be
I think
wonderful.
that would be because I would build up so much scar tissue where that to the point in college, I would go back to MDIs where or manual insertions, like giving myself needles where it was because I built up so much scar tissue in my like fatty areas that
Yeah.
I was either not receiving insulin or the sensor would not be picking up any of my blood sugars because there's so much scar tissue built
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, at the current moment, these sensors are so finicky. They're
so
very
finicky. Yeah.
like one thing's off, they hit a muscle, and I mean, the technology is new, as they shouldn't be perfected quite yet.
Right.
But they hit a muscle, they hit extra slab, like a scar
Yeah.
tissue.
Yeah.
It just I get the brief sensor error all the time, just from the one like you move your location just a centimeter or 2 centimeters,
Right.
it could throw it off for the next 10 days that you have the sensor
Right.
on.
So I think for me there, it would be like just continuing to develop how you can reduce the amount of components needed in
Yeah.
order to manage from a pump aspect or like a phone aspect, just reading your blood sugars. If there's one way where, again, I'm always going to be on a pump and I'm always going to need to have a filling tube associated with an IV site to pump insulin into me, right? But
Yeah.
be able to, how do we make that site location just one for both the sensor and your continuous insulin flow versus having multiple ones and having to worry about multiple things at one time? Because this thing lasts for a week, 10
Yeah.
days, right? But then I'll get the notification maybe a day before, but maybe sometimes where you may not be properly equipped or different things
Yep.
like that, where, hey, if you were to have it all in one location, that would be the best way to like I always have my site be able to change my site. Like I always have the equipment needed there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't always bring with me the spare sensor because
Yeah.
I don't think I need it until it's too late, right?
Yep.
So I would just say being able to consolidate and make the equipment more, I want to say flexible, but like combining the two into one would probably be the next step I can see.
I mean, I
going.
think we're a lot closer to that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think we're closer to that than a cure. But I
100%,
think
yeah.
technology has come to our aid, and I know a lot of people right now that aren't happy with the technology. But I would have to say to have it be where it's at right now is pretty. I think about what it's going to be like in 10 years.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. I mean, this is a starting point. This is almost a revolution
Yeah.
in control, especially for something that you look at statistically that a lot of people have type 1 diabetes, but not a majority of the world.
Mhm.
So the fact that they're able to build this type of technology for
Yeah.
a small amount of people on
Right.
the planet is really
It's really it's and again, you've had it for how long you said?
5 years.
5 years.
This June.
23 coming up. Going from like when I was first introduced to a pump to now is like going from a flip phone to the newest
Yeah.
iPhone. Like it's crazy because you would just put in a basal rate, put in an insulin to carb ratio and a correction factor on the first pump.
Yeah.
And on the first pump I didn't have any of, the only thing I had was a basal rate in there. Like I had to
Wow.
manually calculate how many carbs I ate.
So essentially, the pump was just like a pen, but just attached to you.
Exactly. And it was like, instead of giving myself, Lantus and Novolog, I have Novolog consistently running even while I was sleeping throughout the night, where it would last for 3 days. And I'd rather do that than having to give like 8 to 9 or 10, however many
Yeah.
insulin shots a day. So that's why I chose it. But again, to go from that to, we have something that's reading our blood sugars 24/7, and now that it's hooked up to my pump, like it automatically will do it for me rather than me having to check it, because
Yeah.
it's just reading my blood sugars.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good things coming down the pipeline, but I just think being able to configure something into one would definitely be the next step that I can see happening. And um, you know, other than that, I can't really think of, other than the cure, and then maybe some different ways to analyze individuals and how they're handling diabetes versus like trying to collectively put somebody in a category.
Yeah, and I think that again is just a viewpoint.
Yeah.
Um, a viewpoint from doctor's office, just a societal viewpoint as
Mhm.
well, just acknowledging that everybody with type 1 diabetes, it's a very individualized disease.
Definitely. Definitely.
Do you have any further thoughts on anything, any topics that we discussed or missed that you'd want to mention?
No, I think that I again I appreciate the opportunity. I know this is something that you're getting started up here, but this is something that I've been very passionate about for a long time. I work with, I used to, I don't so much do coaching or baseball lessons anymore, but
Yeah.
I would have people from, up in Maine, people in Rhode Island, just contacts and say, hey, I have a cousin or a nephew that is a diabetic and he wants some help with how to like baseball side of it. So
Yeah.
I'd give lessons, but then on the back end, like, can you talk to him about his diabetes, how important it is to like make sure that he's checking his sugars, right?
Yeah.
So I would do a lot of that in the past, and then, just trying to be a resource for people. I've type 2 diabetes is different, but I've spoken with some elderly people from up in Maine where, what works for them, what doesn't, what
Yeah.
feelings do they have. And then just being a resource, like I said, to as many people as you can. And the experience and exposure that we go through is only going to be supportive to how they're trying to accomplish. And we're all, at the end of the day, it is almost like a team where we're all trying to help each other out the best that we can, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm able to shed some of my experiences there, that's all I try to do.
Well, I really appreciate that. I'm sure I'm going to be speaking for many who are listening that they also really appreciate that. And that is the goal with this T1 determined branding concept, is to build that community.
Yeah.
If we have a place, just a platform where people can go and talk to others or listen to others talk and converse and just learn little tricks and then again tailor it to themselves. I think I learned a lot on my own.
Yeah.
I had the internet at my disposal, but I mean, we can get into so many details. That's another
yeah.
conversation, but it's just, I think it's very important to have a place for others to learn and to always learn, whether you're just diagnosed, whether you had it your whole life, understanding that from 7 years old to 30 to 60, it's going to be constantly changing.
Absolutely maximize the resources that we have. And this is a great way to do it, as well as just looking on the website and seeing what else you can find out there. So this is a great start.
Well, thank you very much, Ben, for joining me.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben, for enriching our audience with an immense amount of knowledge and for providing us with actionable items like note-taking. Next, on the T1 Determined podcast, I delve into the trip report of my recent one-week adventure to Denali Base Camp. For 7 days, with a team, I lived, climbed, and learned on the Gahiltna Glacier. While practicing mountaineering skills like crevasse rescue, I also discovered how my body, and more specifically, my blood glucose, reacted to physical exertion and altered nutrition while surviving in one of the most remote regions of the world. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and stay tuned for next time.
Hi, I'm Ben Wessel, UPS Business Development Consultant and former URIRM baseball player, and I'm T1 determined.